Hi, I'm Dr. Jason J. Campbell, and I want to thank you for taking the time to watch my videos. I'm continuing the analysis into human rights in this lecture series. I'm actually beginning a new section. This section is going to be and primarily focus on the role of human rights in internally displaced persons, refugees, IDPs. So I'll be using refugee, IDPs, internally displaced persons almost interchangeably. I do recognize from an academic standpoint there are some distinctions to be made between refugees and IDPs. I'm not going to get that technical. This is an introductory public lecture. I want to keep the information as accessible as possible. The book that we'll be using for our discourse in human rights is Human Rights in the World Community. This is, I've read a lot of human rights books. I've read a lot of anthologies and edited works on human rights. A very, very comprehensive book. Right now we're already 7 hours into the lecture. I still have maybe about 10 or so pages left to go, and I didn't cover a third of the content in this. I am thinking maybe when I get closer to the end of the Nietzsche series, or maybe the beginning of 2012, to extend the discourse on human rights and do a second installment of my human rights lecture, because one, I'm passionate about, obviously, having founded a non-governmental organization that is dedicated solely to the prevention of genocide globally. Human rights is a huge issue for me. It's often underrepresented in the media because it is so doom and gloom. But again, my point here is to make the information a little bit more accessible and allow the general population to have access to otherwise difficult information to access. So the section is titled in the book, it is titled The International and National Protection of Refugees. So the International and National Protection of Refugees, Mary Ellen Fullerton, and this is page 136 through 145 in the book. And we will begin. Human rights, and this is section 5.3 in the notes, and this covers pages 136 through 145 in the book. Okay, so we begin with the Nuremberg trial proceedings. I just want to read a little bit of this. Actually, I'm going to read all of it, but as I go through and read it, before I forget, also, you guys who have been watching for a while, you know the routine. If you want to get access to the notes, I strongly recommend that you do. Click the banner ad that will pop up. It'll take you to the PDF. Download the PDF. Click the link in the description box. It'll take you to the PDF. Write your notes alongside. Have another sheet of paper. Take notes alongside these notes so that you can follow along, because I'll be referencing my notes throughout the discourse. We're on page 15 of my notes, and it's section 5.3. So, Nuremberg trial proceedings. Charter of the International Military Tribunal. 2. Jurisdiction and General Principles. Article 6. War Crimes. C. Crimes against Humanity. And here is how war crimes are defined. Namely, violations of the law or customs of law. Such violations shall not include, but not limited to, murder, ill treatment, or deportation of slave labor, deportation to slave labor, or for any other purposes of civilian population of or in occupied territory. Murder, killing, blah, 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 blah. Deportation. Emphasis on that. C. Crimes against humanity. Namely, murder, extermination, enslavement, deportation, and other inhumane acts committed against any civilian population, ... Okay. We are going to look at I'm not going to get too technical in this. I've actually submitted the final manuscript for a book on genocidal intentionality that I'm hopefully going to publish with Roman and Littlefield. And part of the discourse that I've done has to do with the systematic targeting for deportation of some targeted population, right? The forced deportation of populations as a means of controlling national demography, to be technical. In the discourse, you will see, and for me as a genocide scholar, I've recognized that there's a huge overlap between the forced deportation of targeted populations and the intent to destroy the population in whole or in part, ... Sorry for just jumping headfirst into a rather technical assessment, but the point is the role of forced deportation, the status of refugee populations throughout the world, internally displaced persons throughout the world, is something that really, it's rarely reported. It was good to see that Yahoo, probably maybe a few days before the posting of this, I had already posted my lecture notes by that time, but a few days before the posting of this video, reported on sort of the lost voice of refugees throughout the world. So it's good to see that it's becoming mainstream discourse, and the whole point of me doing the lecture series is to make it even more mainstream. Alright, we're going to talk about 4 factors resulting in mass deportation of internally displaced persons. I'm in no sense suggesting that these four factors are exhaustive. There could be more, there probably are more, and we'll go through and make sense of these 4 factors. So 4 factors resulting in mass deportation. Sorry about the spacing. Alright, first, obviously genocide. Right? Genocide is a huge factor in the mass deportation of what are classified as members of a targeted community. And basically what it looks like is something like this, right? We have a state, and we have members of the target population X, and we have what I call genocidal orchestrators. That's the name that I've given them. And the genocidal orchestrators have targeted members of this population for extermination or deportation. The question is why. For any number of factors. The sort of foundational reason is that they attempt to control the natural dispersion of demographic identifiers within the state, right, to be technical. And what they want to do is they want to purge. This is active purgation. They want to purge these individuals from the state, right? So this would be a state of affairs 1, and the state of affairs 2 would look like that, right? It would be just the genocidal orchestrators, their community of moderates, but the targeted population would have been purged. This purgation in this sense, right, there's many different ways to talk about cleansing or purgation, specifically with respect to the idea of mass enforced deportation. This purgation is obviously a result of forced, I should say mass forced deportation. Right? Mass forced deportation. It might result as, there's a number of factors. We can get even more complicated, but I don't want to, make it overly sort of tiresome intellectually. We just started the lecture. But it could be the case that the population has been targeted for extermination. The extermination has begun. So, for example, the Janjaweed targeting members of the population, which then flee to Chad and become IDPs in Chad, is an example, right? The fact that people were slaughtered forced the deportation. It could be the case, however, that there's just a threat of mass extermination. If you don't leave, it is likely that the violence will escalate, and insofar as you stick around, you've been duly warned. Since members of the population will be able to sense, and this is also given sort of technological accessibility. This was primarily the case in the use of the radio, RTLM, in the Rwanda genocide, right? If you start to hear the sort of hate speech that these people are roaches and they're insect, they're lice, they don't deserve to live, that's an indication that the government has and is about to operationalize the and systematized the process of